Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. Phil Giraldi joins us now. Phil, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for joining us. You have been writing recently, very interesting stuff. I find your work always interesting. That the war party in Congress, which I will define as almost all the Republicans and almost all the Democrats, is trying to figure out what to do with Ukraine, and some of their current and former members have been theorizing as to what should happen. How well established is, in your view, support for Ukraine in the war party? Or when Joe Biden asks for another $28 billion, might he not get it?
Well, I think the short answer is that right now, he will get it. As you point out, the war party consists of nearly all Republicans and nearly all Democrats, at least on the surface. We are starting to hear some rumblings of people that are concerned where this is going, how long is it going to take, how much money are they going to waste, and questions like that. And so I think there's a growing interest in creating a way out of this. And I think we are getting rumblings of that even from some people in the Pentagon. The New York Times article last week about the CIA having reported to the White House and others that things were going badly in Ukraine and that it was not likely to be successful is a sign of a leak. It's a sign of I've spoken with some other agency friends, and we all agree this is a sign of a leak, that a lot of the analysts who are assigned to Ukraine have probably been seeing the light for some time, and now when they're not being listened to, they're feeding this stuff to journalists.
All right. So does this mean that the truth, that it is more likely than not that Russia will prevail and Ukraine can't go on much longer, is making its way to the Oval Office? Or the analysts have decided to release the truth because they know what they're telling their bosses is not making its way up the line and not getting to the decision makers?
Yeah, well, I think the key there is the analysts are the ones that are frustrated, because these are people that are honest human beings who are trying to do a good job in an impossible situation, given the political pressure that's coming down both on the leadership in the intelligence agencies and beyond that. And so they are the ones that are rebelling. Now, the question becomes, when does the wake up call actually get through to the White House and get through to the Secretary of State and and the other people that are decision makers on this? There are maybe some signs that this is starting to shift a bit too, that they are wanting some kind of flag that they can raise that says this is not forever. This is it's a money pit. Oh yeah, sure, we'll keep doing that because we have to do it to weaken the Russians. But the fact is, this will someday end.
Is there an open acknowledgement, either in the war party or among senior intelligence community leadership, that this is just a proxy war, that Ukraine is a battering ram to try and drive Vladimir Putin from office?
Oh, I think that sense of what this is all about has been there for quite some time. I'm often very surprised when I speak to with former colleagues and some people who are associated with the Pentagon, and they're all kind of soft, shall we say, on the issue, even though they know what the political lines are on it. And I get that impression. I know others like Larry Johnson have been getting the same kind of signals, and Ray McGovern, and so it's out there, and now it's just a question of uh, what is the contrived narrative we're going to see, and which probably is going to be surfacing pretty soon, given that we're a year away from elections.
Well,
Uh, to
The
demonstrate
neocons that have
this is
been driving this, whether it's Victoria Nuland, who's been driving this for 10 years now, or not as well known or outspoken neocons, do they still think that Ukrainian victory over the Russians is possible and that the billions the US and NATO are pouring in have been and will be well spent? Do they actually believe that in their hearts?
I don't know if they have hearts, but I rather suspect that there are two conflicting devils in their heads, and the one on the one side is saying we have to do this because this is politics, and the other one is kind of telling them that this is a tough road. Right from the start we knew that Ukraine didn't have the resources to take on the Russians. So I think these two things are warring in them, and the fact is now I think this we're looking at the administration and others allied with the administration finding some kind of political solution.
I just interviewed Patrick Lancaster. I don't know if you know him. He's an independent American video journalist who's actually on the Eastern Front, in the Donbass, in the areas that Russia says have historically been Russian and Ukraine claims are still Ukrainian. And there's a couple of takeaways from that interview. One is that without a regular, consistent, systematic, overwhelming Western supplies, Ukraine is cooked. The other is Ukraine is cooked anyway. The third is that American generals and leaders are not telling the truth. And the fourth is that the mainstream press is not telling the truth. He intimated that you could count on one hand the media entities that are telling the truth here. So how much longer can the neocons and the people that are behind this war, the globalists in Western Europe, the people that run the State Department, the folks around Joe Biden, the managers and keepers of the presidency and the president's reelection campaign, keep this facade up? Can they keep this going for another year and a half to take him over? I guess a little less than that, another 16 or 17 months. It's September on Friday, to take him over the finish line in November of 2024. That's a long-winded question. I apologize for it, but I think you get what I'm trying to drive at.
Yeah, well, I rather suspect that the way they see it, right? Well, let's put it in maybe Zelensky's perspective. Zelensky knows this is a losing prospect, and all he's trying to do is extort as much money as he can from the United States and NATO before that happens. And so anyway, I face from his perspective, it's to keep the money going. Was it yesterday he said if we wanted elections in Ukraine, we'd have to give him $5 billion. So this is the game that's being played in his head. And I think the neocons are into the same thing. They see this as something that is sustainable as long as we keep pumping billions and billions and billions of dollars into this system. Because first of all, the Russians are not going to be so foolish as to try to occupy all of Ukraine. They're quite happy with what they've been doing and what they're trying to achieve, which is controlling Donbass, controlling the route between Donbass and the Crimea, and that's pretty much it. So it's not going to be Russia going in there and suddenly we have this incredible guerrilla war going on for the next year. I don't see that happening. So, but the neocons are quite happy to take your tax money and my tax money and keep feeding this into there. So we arrive at next year, and at next year we basically have another situation developing, which is American elections.
Don't the neocons? Do neocons believe that military victory by Ukraine is still possible? Or are they naive enough to believe that? They may be saying it, but do they honestly, some of them are military people, do they honestly believe this?
I don't think they believe it, but they are certainly saying it. I'm sure you saw the article last week with General Petraeus and Max Boot, both saying that victory is around the corner. This defies all logic. It defies everything we're hearing from genuine military leaders.
I
Like
would love to see you
Gregor.
debate Max Boot someday, but I doubt he'd come on the show. Here's General Petraeus. This really set Scott Ritter off, and it may you as well. Basically saying on air what he and Max argued in the op-ed of which you speak.
The big question in my mind, I think, is whether or when the Russians might begin to crack and crumble. They've been in the line for over a year in many cases. Yes, they have actually established very impressive defensive belts, but they don't have the same motivation that Ukrainian soldiers do, who can look over their shoulder and see what it is that they're fighting for. Their very independence, their survival, their citizens. That's not the case for the Russians, many of whom have been conscripted, not volunteers, clearly. The question is, when might that moment arrive? And it's very hard to answer, having been in a number of battles where the enemy all of a sudden cracked, but you couldn't predict that until that moment actually happened.
So much to unpack there. Our military people tell us he's never been in any battles, much less one where the enemy cracked. But this is pure neocon propaganda for him to suggest that the Russian military, larger and more skillful than any other army on the planet, is going to crack or crumble. Why? Because David Petraeus says so?
Well, I think this is a case of follow the money. We'd have to see who's paying David Petraeus to say what he says. He's probably connected with several foundations. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but they're neocon foundations. And I'm sure that he's looking out for his own self-interest. And so far as him being a great warrior, I believe I'm correct in saying he has a Silver Star, which is a combat decoration, but it was awarded when he was bombarding Fallujah. And the citation reads something like, yeah, he was there and guns were being shot and he didn't get scared.
I mean, is he a credible military analyst or just a politician in a uniform with ribbons on his chest?
Most generals are politicians in uniform with ribbons on their chest. And the more ribbons is the more they're a politician.
I'll give you another example. General Milley, now he's leaving office, I believe, on Friday or Thursday of this week, and is making a farewell tour. We'll show you a clip of him being interviewed by an Arab media facility. It's in English, arguing that the Ukrainian military has breached the first of the three defensive rings that the Russian military has built to keep the Ukraine military out of eastern Ukraine, out of the Donbas region. And right after that, we'll juxtapose it with Patrick Lancaster, the video journalist, courageous and intellectually honest, basically saying, I'm here, he's in Washington, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's absolutely dead wrong.
They've attacked through the first main defensive belt. This is a defense in depth that the Russians had many months to prepare. It's got minefields, it's got dragon's teeth, it's got tank ditches. It's a very, very complex set of defensive preparations that the Ukrainians are fighting through. And they're fighting through it. The Ukrainians have a significant amount of combat power remaining. This is not over yet. So I think it's frankly too early to say whether it succeeded or failed. It clearly has had partial success.
You're there. Your eyes and ears and soul and heart are right there. He's in Washington.
He's just playing word games. I mean, he's covering his you-know-what by just saying, oh, yeah, they've gone through the first line. Now, if you actually confront him about it and say, no, they're anywhere close to going through the real line, well, he'll say, well, look at this one little spot where they took 100 meters farther, or say 500 meters. Maybe took one village here and there when over here Russia took 3. It's just word games saying, okay, in one spot maybe there is a little bit of forward action, but no considerable movement as far as the front line goes. It's just playing word games to confuse people and to try to lead people into a certain way of showing them that their tax dollars aren't going to waste and their tax dollars aren't only killing civilians.
I think we articulated one statement General Milley made during the Ukraine war, and then, of course, he was for it, which was intellectually honest, and he was forced to backtrack it. Of course, we do have him on record. I'm doing air quotes because it's in the documents that were released, according to the government, by the young National Guardsman from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, that the Joint Chiefs of Staff are convinced Ukraine is going to lose. But why would anybody believe what General Milley is saying?
I don't think anyone should believe anything he says. Again, these people are showmen. They have self-interests that propel what they say and what they do. Milley will no doubt have a seat on the board of Raytheon as soon as he chooses. And this is a common pattern. We have a system which I noted when I was in CIA, where you have the working people who do a good job to the best of their ability at the lower levels of the organization, and the higher you go, the more corrupt it gets, and it gets more political. And this bedevils the United States government at all levels, in all agencies, and in all functions. It's
including the military. General Milley, at least for the rest of the week, is the senior ranking military officer in all the U.S. military.
Yeah, I would say as a general rule, when you scratch a general, you scratch a politician. And that's because the political instincts are what get them where they are. There is no general. I mean, this is not the Second World War anymore. It's not George S. Patton. These are people who are bureaucrats primarily, who never in a direct way fought a war. And basically they're there because of their willingness to go along with what they're being told to say.
Tom Malinowski, a former congressman from New Jersey, liberal Democrat, who now works for one of these defense-funded think tanks in Washington, D.C., recently opined, you outlined this in your article, that the neocons think there are three ways Ukraine can win. One is victory, military victory. The other is a diplomatic solution. And the third is probably the one they really want, Phil, endless war. Now, we know that the only diplomatic victory would be if Zelensky just stops and leaves Russia where it is, with jurisdictional control over the Russian-speaking, cultural, historical part of what Ukraine calls Ukraine. But Zelensky says he wants Crimea back, which will play General Hodges in a few minutes. He claims is possible, but nobody else does. So, Malinowski, is this another trial balloon, endless war, or diplomacy? Do they really think the country would accept endless war as it did in Afghanistan? Do they really think that they can tell Zelensky what to do with respect to diplomacy?
Well, I think Tom Malinowski is a faithful Democratic politician from New Jersey, unfortunately. The fact is that this article is devastatingly awful. He throws out a couple of red herrings. The one is the victory for the Ukrainians, which he knows is impossible. The other one is a negotiated settlement, which he claims is impossible because the Russians and Putin would block it. And then he throws out this other thing, which is to keep feeding weapons and money into Zelensky, into what remains of the Ukrainian ability to fight. And we let this drag on. And then miraculously, NATO lets Ukraine join them. And that kind of ends the war. But the interesting thing about the article is the timing. This is all timed to end sort of towards the end of next summer, which means this is all calculated to make Joe Biden look like a great military victor in time just before the election. What a surprise.
Wow. You know, war is such a deadly, dangerous thing. You don't know what turns it's going to take. It appears as though Joe Biden has used up the 113 billion that the Congress, when Mrs. Pelosi was the speaker, gave to him, and he now wants another 28 or 30 billion. I don't know that he's going to get this without the Republican speaker making some extraordinary concessions, not having to do with this, but domestic policy, to the Democrats, so that the Democrats will vote with him, because there's about 40 or 45 Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, who every once in a while grow a backbone. And this time they've said not a nickel more to Ukraine.
Well, hopefully they will maintain their backbones. I'd be surprised if they did. But the fact is that this is, I think I saw today cited, maybe in the New York Times, that the actual spending on Ukraine so far, now we don't know how much of this money actually goes into the military as opposed to into people's pockets, since we are not monitoring it in any way, but it exceeds what was spent on military costs in the 20 years we spent in Afghanistan already.
I am not surprised, but devastated to know that. Phil Giraldi, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. More as we get it. Larry Johnson, 4 o'clock to Eastern today, and about 2 o'clock Eastern on Friday. Our roundtable, Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Thank you for watching. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.